The neon had been dying for 6 months, one letter at a time. Now the sign just read, "Hey KLLs against the black Missouri sky," the missing letters like teeth knocked out of a familiar smile. Earl Haskell stood at the window of his empty diner at 12:47 a.m., watching his breath fog the glass, and thought about his father's hands building that sign in 1971. The highway was dead. Had been dead for hours. A Tuesday in late November, temperature dropping toward 20, and Earl should have closed at 10 like the new schedule said, but the new schedule meant admitting things had changed. So he kept the coffee hot and the grill scraped and the lights on, pretending for no one. He was about to flip the sign to closed when the headlight appeared, single beam, wobbling slightly, coming from the north. Earl watched it grow, heard the engine coughing before he saw the bike. A Harley Softail, older model, ridden by a man hunched so far forward his beard nearly touched the handlebars. The bike swung into the lot and died, with a shudder that didn't sound voluntary. The rider sat there a moment, hands still on the grips. Then he dismounted like a man who'd forgotten how his legs worked. Earl unlocked the door. "Kitchen's closed," he said, because that was true. "But the coffee's fresh, and I can heat something up." The biker looked at him. Late 50s, maybe. A face like a leather map of somewhere hard. His jacket said, "Iron Spur MC, Springfield," and beneath that, "Road Captain." But what Earl noticed was the color of the man's lips, pale blue, nearly white at the edges. "How long you been riding?" Earl asked. "Joplin." The word came out cracked. "That's 4 hours in this cold." "Couldn't sleep." The biker's hands were shaking as he pulled off his gloves. "Thought riding would help. Stopped helping somewhere around Branson." Earl stepped back from the door. "Get inside before you add frostbite to your problems." The man's name was Donnie, though he said most people called him Compass. Earl didn't ask why. He poured coffee and set it on the counter, then went to the back and fired up the grill. The chili was gone. He'd dumped the last of it at 10, another small surrender, but he had ground beef and beans and he knew the recipe by heart. Cheryl had written it on an index card 23 years ago, the paper now soft as cloth and stained with the ghost of 100 batches. Earl made the chili. When he brought it out, Compass had both hands wrapped around the coffee mug like a man holding a lantern. His color was better. Not good, but better. "You didn't have to do that," Compass said. "I know. What do I owe you?" Earl shook his head. "Cup of coffee and yesterday's chili? You'd be doing me a favor taking it off my hands." It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie Earl's father had taught him. You never let a man feel like charity. You let him feel like he was helping you out. Compass ate without talking. Earl wiped down the counter that didn't need, wiping and checked the coffee that didn't need checking. The clock on the wall, same clock his mother had hung in 1974, ticked toward 1:30. "This is good," Compass said finally. "The chili? My wife's recipe. She here?" "No." Earl kept wiping. "Cancer, 4 years back." Compass set down his spoon. "I'm sorry." "Yeah." They sat with that for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Earl thought about the sign, the HAKLLs, and how Cheryl used to joke that it would outlast both of them. "My brother died 8 weeks ago," Compass said. "Overdose. Fentanyl in something that wasn't supposed to have it." Earl stopped wiping. He'd been clean 11 months. Compass reached into his vest and pulled out something small, held it in his palm, a bronze chip, the kind they gave at AA meetings. 11 months. I was going to take him out for a ride when he hit the year." "I'm sorry," Earl said, and meant it. "I keep thinking if I ride far enough, I'll find the part of the road where it makes sense." Compass looked out the window. "Hasn't worked yet." The grill hissed as it cooled. Earl thought about all the things he could say and settled on the only one that felt true. "You need a place to sleep tonight. There's a room upstairs. Nothing fancy, but the heat works." Compass looked at him a long moment. "You don't know me." "I know you're cold and tired and grieving, and I've got a room that's sitting empty. That's enough." Something shifted in the biker's face, not softening exactly, more like recognition. "What's your name?" "Earl Haskell. My daddy built this place." Compass nodded slowly. He looked around the diner, the cracked vinyl booths, the pie case that hadn't held pie in months, the photograph behind the register of Earl and Cheryl on their wedding day, Earl in a suit that didn't fit, and Cheryl laughing at something outside the frame. Haskell's, Compass said. "I've heard of this place. Guys used to talk about it back in the day. Said there was a diner on 76 that never turned away a rider." "That was my father. Looks like it runs in the family." Earl didn't answer. He was thinking about the envelope in the drawer beneath the register, the one from First Regional Bank with the red stamp that said, "Final Notice. 3 months behind. $37,000. A number that might as well have been 37 million. But that wasn't this man's problem. "Room's up the stairs, second door on the left," Earl said. "Sheets are clean. I'll be down here a while longer." Compass finished his chili, left a 20 on the counter despite Earl's protests, and climbed the stairs with the heaviness of a man carrying more than his own weight. Earl locked the door behind him, shut off the grill, and sat in his father's booth by the window. He pulled out the envelope he hadn't opened and looked at it for a long time. Then he put it back in the drawer and went to bed. The next morning, Compass was gone. The 20 was still on the counter, weighed down by the bronze sobriety chip. Beneath it, a note in blocky handwriting. "Thank you. I'll remember." Earl picked up the chip and turned it over in his hand. 11 months, a man's whole second chance reduced to an ounce of bronze. He put it in his pocket without knowing why. 2 weeks later, the man from the bank came in person. Earl had been expecting a phone call, maybe another letter. Instead, a silver Lexus pulled into the lot at 2:15 on a Thursday afternoon, and a man in a gray suit stepped out like he was afraid the gravel might scuff his shoes. He stood there a moment, looking at the diner the way you'd look at a dog you were about to put down. Earl watched from behind the counter. He had 3 customers, Midge Paulson picking at a slice of pie she couldn't really afford, and the Delacroix brothers arguing about deer season in the corner booth. Not exactly a thriving lunch rush. The man in the suit pushed through the door. He was younger than Earl expected, mid-40s maybe, with the kind of haircut that cost more than Earl's weekly grocery bill. His eyes moved around the room, taking inventory. "Mr. Haskell? That's me. Martin Keller, First Regional Bank." He didn't offer his hand. "I think you know why I'm here." Earl set down the rag he'd been holding. "I think I can guess." Keller glanced at the other customers, then back at Earl. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" "This is as private as it gets." Something flickered across Keller's face. Annoyance, maybe, or discomfort. He lowered his voice anyway. "Mr. Haskell, you're 93 days past due on your loan. That's 3 missed payments. Under the terms of your agreement, the bank has the right to accelerate the full balance." "I know what the terms say." "Then you know we're not required to give you any additional time." Keller pulled a folder from his briefcase, set it on the counter. "But I'm here because the bank prefers to avoid foreclosure when possible. It's costly. It's time-consuming. And frankly, it doesn't look good." Earl didn't touch the folder. "What are you offering?" 60 days to bring the account current. All 3 payments plus late fees and penalties. That's $41,200. Keller said the number like it was nothing, like it wasn't more money than Earl had seen in one place in his entire life. "If you can't make that happen, we'll need to begin proceedings." Midge Paulson had stopped pretending to eat her pie. The Delacroix brothers had gone quiet. Earl felt their eyes on him, felt the weight of 53 years in this building pressing down on his shoulders. 60 days, he said. 60 days. Keller snapped his briefcase shut. "I'd encourage you to be realistic about your options, Mr. Haskell. This location, the building's condition, the traffic patterns on this highway, the math doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a long time. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go." He left the folder on the counter and walked out. The Lexus kicked up gravel as it pulled away. Earl stood there for a long moment. Then he picked up the folder and carried it to the back office, where no one could see him read it. The numbers were worse than he'd thought. The penalties alone were more than he made in 2 months. And Keller was right about one thing. The math didn't work. Hadn't worked since Cheryl got sick and the medical bills started piling up. Hadn't worked since the new highway bypass pulled traffic away from Route 76. Hadn't worked since Earl stopped being able to pretend. He sat in his father's chair, in his father's office, surrounded by his father's dreams, and he didn't know what to do. That night, he almost called his daughter. Jenny lived in Kansas City now, worked for some marketing firm Earl didn't understand. She'd offered to help when Cheryl died, offered again when she'd seen the diner's books 2 Christmases ago, Both times, Earl had told her he was fine, told her he didn't need her money or her pity, told her the diner had survived worse. He got as far as pulling up her number before he put the phone down. A man took care of his own problems. That's what his father had taught him. You didn't burden your children with your failures. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in Springfield, Compass sat in a folding chair in the back room of the Iron Spur clubhouse and listened to a man talk about his first week sober. The meeting was small, 8, maybe 9 people. Club members and a few locals who'd heard the Iron Spur hosted NA meetings on Thursday nights. It had been Compass's brother's idea years ago. Said the clubhouse felt safer than a church basement. Said nobody judged you for your tattoos here. Compass hadn't missed a meeting since Marcus died. Couldn't say why, exactly. He wasn't an addict himself. But something about sitting in that room, hearing those stories, made him feel closer to understanding what his brother had carried. After the meeting, a man named Dale Whitmore caught up with him in the parking lot. Dale was 62, a retired attorney who'd joined the club after his wife passed, and his practice dried up. He still had the lawyer's habit of speaking precisely, even in a leather vest. "You've been quiet lately," Dale said. "Even for you." "Just thinking." "About Marcus?" Compass pulled out a cigarette, didn't light it. "About a lot of things. There's this diner I stopped at a couple weeks back, up on 76. Old place, been there forever. Guy who runs it, Earl. He took me in when I was half frozen and didn't ask for anything." "Haskell's," Dale said. "I know that place. Rode through there 20 years ago, back when Earl's father was still alive. He gave me a meal and a place to sleep when I was running from something I shouldn't have been running from." Compass looked at him. "You never mentioned that." "Never came up." Dale leaned against his bike. "Why are you thinking about it now?" "I don't know. Just a feeling." Compass finally lit the cigarette, watched the smoke curl upward. "Guy's in trouble. I could see it in his face. The kind of trouble he's too proud to talk about." "You thinking about going back?" "Maybe. After what he did for me." "You don't owe him anything, Compass. A meal and a bed, that's kindness. But you can't save everyone who's kind to you." "I know." Compass took a long drag. "But Marcus would have liked him. That's the thing. Marcus would have wanted to help." Dale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "If you do go back, and if it's the kind of trouble I think it is, let me know. Banks have been pulling some shady stuff with rural properties lately. Acceleration clauses that don't hold up, fees that aren't in the original contracts. I've seen it before." "You'd look into it? For a place like Haskell's? For a man who'd taken a stranger in the middle of the night?" Dale smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a retired lawyer and more like the young writer he'd been 40 years ago. "Yeah, I'd look into it." Martin Keller got home to his apartment at 8:47 that night. The place was too big for one person. A 2-bedroom he'd rented after the divorce, thinking maybe Sophie would stay over sometimes. She hadn't. 15 years old, and she had better things to do than spend weekends with her father in his empty apartment, with its empty refrigerator and its view of a parking garage. He loosened his tie and poured 2 fingers of scotch, then sat on the couch that still had the tags on the cushions. His phone showed 3 missed calls from corporate, probably Hendricks wanting an update on the Q4 cleanup, 12 non-performing loans to resolve before December 31st, 12 families, 12 businesses, 12 sets of dreams that didn't fit the spreadsheet. Keller pulled up the Haskell file on his laptop. The diner had been in the family since 1971. Earl's father had paid off the original mortgage in 1989. Then Earl had refinanced in 2019 to cover his wife's medical bills. Cancer. The chemo alone had been $200,000. Keller looked at the numbers and saw what he always saw, a man who'd made bad decisions in a bad situation, who'd borrowed against his only asset and lost the bet. But he also saw the photo he'd noticed on his drive down, the one behind the register. A younger Earl, a woman who must have been his wife, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. He closed the laptop. It wasn't his job to care about photos. It was his job to clean up the portfolio and protect the bank's interests. That's what he told himself as he finished the scotch and went to bed in a room that still smelled like paint and empty promises. Back in the Ozarks, Earl couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark and listened to the building settle around him. The creak of old wood, the rattle of the heating system Cheryl had always said needed replacing. 53 years of sounds familiar as his own heartbeat. 60 days. $41,000. He thought about the chip in his pocket, the one Compass had left behind. 11 months of sobriety ended by something that wasn't even supposed to be there. A man's whole future stolen by a few milligrams of poison. At least Marcus had been fighting for something. At least he'd been trying to get better. What was Earl fighting for? A building that was falling apart? A legacy nobody wanted? A sign that couldn't even spell his own name anymore? He got up, walked downstairs in the dark, and sat in his father's booth. The highway was empty. The neon buzzed and flickered. Ha KLLs, like a heartbeat that couldn't quite find its rhythm. In the drawer beneath the register, the folder from the bank sat waiting. 60 days. Earl pulled out his phone and looked at Jenny's number again. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then he put the phone away and sat in the dark until morning. Compass came back on a Saturday, 3 weeks after that frozen night. He didn't come alone. Dale Whitmore rode beside him, and behind them came a third bike, a woman named Rosa Garza, who handled the club's books and had a way of looking at financial documents that made bankers nervous. Earl was behind the counter when they walked in, elbow deep in a sink full of dishes, because the dishwasher had died 2 days ago and he couldn't afford to fix it. He looked up at the sound of the door and saw Compass standing there with the sobriety chip in his outstretched hand. "You left this," Earl said. "I know." Compass set the chip on the counter between them. "Thought I'd come back for it." "Took you 3 weeks." "Had to bring reinforcements." Earl looked at the other two, the older man with the careful eyes, the woman with the leather satchel. He knew what this was. He'd been dreading it since the moment Compass walked out his door. "I appreciate you coming," Earl said, "but I don't need help." "Mr. Haskell." Dale stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd spent 30 years in courtrooms. "My name is Dale Whitmore. I'm a retired attorney, and I've been looking into First Regional Bank's lending practices in this region." "I didn't ask you to do that." "No, but Compass told me what you did for him, and I did some digging on my own time." Dale pulled a folder from inside his jacket. "What I found is concerning. The acceleration clause in your loan agreement, the one that lets them demand full payment after 90 days. It wasn't in the original contract you signed." Earl's hand stilled in the dishwater. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone added it during a refinancing modification 3 years ago. You signed a stack of documents when you restructured the loan, correct? After your wife's medical bills?" "I signed what they told me to sign. Most people do. That's what they count on." Dale opened the folder. "The modification you agreed to extended your payment term and lowered your monthly amount. But buried in the new terms was a clause that didn't exist before, one that lets them accelerate the entire balance after just 90 days of missed payments. Standard practice is 6 months, minimum. This is predatory." Earl dried his hands slowly. He didn't look at the folder. "Even if that's true, what difference does it make? I still owe the money. I still can't pay." "It makes a difference because it's leverage," Rosa said. She had a voice like gravel and honey, the kind that made you listen. "Banks don't like lawsuits. They don't like publicity. And they really don't like state attorneys, general asking questions about their lending practices. I'm not looking for a lawsuit. I'm not looking for charity." Earl's voice hardened. "I've been running this diner for 31 years. My father ran it for 22 before that. We never asked anybody for anything, and I'm not about to start now." Compass had been quiet through all of this. Now he spoke. "Your father took me in once." Earl looked at him. 1987. I was 19 years old, running from a home that wasn't worth running to. Broke down on 76 in the middle of August, no money, no plan, nothing but a bike that barely worked, and a chip on my shoulder the size of Texas. Compass picked up the sobriety chip, turned it over in his fingers. "Your father fed me, let me sleep in that room upstairs, and in the morning he spent 4 hours helping me fix my bike. When I tried to pay him, you know what he said?" Earl didn't answer. He said, "You'll find someone else to help someday. That's how you pay me back." Compass set the chip down. "I've been trying to pay that debt for 37 years, Earl. Don't take that away from me because you're too proud to let someone return the favor." The diner was quiet. Somewhere in the back, a pipe dripped. The clock on the wall ticked toward noon. Earl looked at the three of them, the road captain with his brother's chip, the lawyer with his folder of evidence, the accountant with her sharp eyes and sharper mind. He thought about his father, about Cheryl, about 53 years of history in these walls. Then he thought about Jenny, and the calls he hadn't made, and all the ways his pride had cost him. "What would you need from me?" he asked. Dale smiled. "Just your permission, and your records. Anything you have from the original loan, the refinancing, the correspondence with the bank. Rosa will go through the numbers. I'll handle the legal angles, and Compass here has an idea about the rest." "The rest?" Compass pulled out his phone. "Haskell's has a reputation, Earl. Riders talk. Your father's name still means something out there, and so does yours. I put out some feelers last week, just testing the waters." He turned the phone so Earl could see the screen. "We've got clubs from 4 states saying they'll ride if we need them. 200 bikes, maybe more. The kind of show that makes people pay attention." Earl stared at the messages, scrolling across the screen. Names he didn't recognize, clubs from places he'd never been, all of them saying the same thing. Haskell's. "We remember. Tell us when." "Why?" The word came out rougher than he intended. Why would strangers do this? "Because you fed a freezing man at 1 in the morning and didn't ask for anything in return," Compass said. "Because your father did the same thing for 40 years before you. Because that's worth protecting." For a long moment, Earl couldn't speak. He turned away, pretending to check something on the grill, and nobody mentioned that his shoulders were shaking. Then the door opened, and Martin Keller walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just slacks and a button-down, like he'd come straight from somewhere that wasn't the office. His eyes moved from Earl to the 3 bikers, to the folder on the counter, and his expression shifted into something careful and cold. "Mr. Haskell, I wasn't expecting to find you with company." "Mr. Keller." Earl's voice was steady now. "These are some friends of mine." "Friends?" Keller's gaze lingered on the iron spur patches. "I see. Well, I came to deliver some news in person. I thought you deserved that much." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "The bank has reviewed your case and determined that the 60-day extension is no longer viable. Given the condition of the property and the likelihood of repayment, we're moving forward with foreclosure proceedings immediately. You have 14 days to vacate." The words hit Earl like a physical blow. "You said 60 days. That was before." Keller set the envelope on the counter. "I'm sorry, Mr. Haskell. I really am. But my hands are tied." "Like hell they are." Dale stepped forward. "I've reviewed the loan documents. The acceleration clause in the current agreement wasn't in the original contract. It was added during the 2021 modification without proper disclosure. That's a violation of federal lending regulations." Keller's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Dale Whitmore, attorney, retired, but I still remember how to file a complaint with the State Banking Commission." Dale's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I also remember how to contact reporters who cover predatory lending practices. The Springfield News Leader has been running a series on rural foreclosures. I imagine they'd be very interested in First Regional's modification procedures." Something flickered across Keller's face. Not fear, exactly, but calculation. He looked at the folder on the counter, at the 3 bikers standing behind Earl, at the old man who wouldn't stop fighting for a diner that was already lost. "You're bluffing," he said. "You don't have anything." "Maybe." Dale shrugged. "But are you willing to bet your career on it? Because if I'm right and this goes public, you won't just lose this foreclosure. You'll lose your job. And given how tight the lending industry is right now, I doubt you'll find another one." "Easily." Keller stood very still. Earl could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. The cost-benefit analysis, the risk assessment, all the calculations that men like him made instead of feeling. Then Keller picked up the envelope he'd just set down. 14 days, he said. "That's the timeline. If you want to fight it, hire a lawyer." He looked at Dale. A real one, not some retired biker playing dress-up. He walked out without looking back. The Lexus peeled out of the lot, spraying gravel against the windows. Earl sank onto a stool. His hands were trembling. "He's scared," Rosa said quietly. "That's why he came in person. That's why he moved up the timeline. Someone at the bank is nervous about what we might find." 14 days. Earl's voice was hollow. "That's not enough time. Even if you're right about the documents, even if the clause is illegal, courts don't move that fast. Nothing moves that fast." Compass put a hand on his shoulder. "Then we don't wait for the courts." "What do you mean?" "I mean we make some noise. I mean we show up. All of us. every writer who ever passed through these doors or heard the stories about your father. We fill this parking lot, and we fill the street, and we make it very clear that Haskell's isn't going quietly. Compass's grip tightened. 14 days is enough time to organize a ride. It's enough time to get cameras here, reporters, maybe even some local politicians who don't want to be seen siding with a predatory bank. And if it doesn't work, then at least you went down fighting. At least you didn't just hand them the keys and walk away. Earl looked around the diner. The cracked booths, the broken sign, the photograph of Cheryl laughing at something he couldn't remember anymore. 53 years, 2 generations, everything his father had built, and everything he'd tried to hold together. "Okay," he said. "Okay, make your calls." Compass was already dialing before the word finished leaving Earl's mouth. That night, the messages went out. Springfield to St. Louis to Kansas City to Little Rock. Club presidents and road captains and lone riders who remembered a hot meal on a cold night. The network lit up like a circuit board coming to life. 14 days, 200 bikes, one last stand for a diner that had never turned anyone away. Earl sat in his father's booth and watched the moon rise over the Ozarks. In his pocket, the sobriety chip pressed against his thigh like a promise. Somewhere out there, engines were already warming up. They came on the 13th day. Earl heard them before he saw them, a low rumble that started somewhere beyond the tree line and grew until it shook the windows in their frames. He stepped outside into the cold December morning and watched the highway fill with headlights. First came the iron spur, Compass at the front, with Dale and Rosa flanking him. Behind them rode the Steel Brotherhood out of St. Louis, 30 bikes in formation. Then the Ozark. Wanderers, the river rats from Memphis, the High Plains drifters who'd ridden through the night from Nebraska. They kept coming, wave after wave, until the parking lot overflowed and the bikes lined both sides of Route 76 for a quarter mile in each direction. Earl counted until he lost track somewhere past 180. The town noticed. Of course it noticed. By 9 o'clock, there were people standing on porches up and down the road, phones out, filming. Midge Paulson brought her whole family. The Delacroix brothers showed up with thermoses of coffee and wouldn't take money for them. Pastor Williams from the Baptist church walked over with a box of donuts and stayed to shake hands with anyone who'd let him. And then the news van arrived. Earl recognized the logo on the side, Channel 7 out of Springfield. A young reporter climbed out with a cameraman in tow, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. She made a beeline for Compass, who pointed her toward Earl. "Mr. Haskell? I'm Dana Chen, Channel 7 News. We received a tip about what's happening here today. Would you be willing to speak on camera?" Earl looked at Compass, who nodded once. "I suppose I would." They set up in front of the diner, the broken sign visible over Earl's shoulder. Dana asked him about the foreclosure, about the bank, about why 200 strangers had ridden from 4 states to stand in his parking lot. Earl told her about his father building this place in 1971, about Cheryl's illness and the bills that followed, about the loan modification he'd signed without understanding, and the clause that had been slipped in while he was too tired and too scared to read the fine print. "And these writers," Dana said, "how do you know them?" Earl was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't. Most of them anyway, but my father knew their fathers, or their uncles, or their friends. He fed them when they were hungry and gave them a place to sleep when they had nowhere else to go. He did it for 40 years, and he never asked for anything in return." Earl's voice caught. He cleared his throat and kept going. "I tried to do the same. One night, about 3 weeks ago, a man came in half frozen, and I made him a bowl of chili, that's all. Just a bowl of chili and a warm place to sleep. And now," he gestured at the crowd behind him, "now all these people came to help me, and I don't know how to feel about that. I've spent my whole life believing a man should handle his own problems. That asking for help was the same as admitting you'd failed. And now," Earl looked at the camera, "now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe asking for help isn't weakness. Maybe it's just being human." The interview aired at noon. By 1 o'clock, the story had been picked up by 3 other stations and was trending on social media. By 2 o'clock, the county commissioner had issued a statement expressing concern about predatory lending practices in the region. By 3 o'clock, Dale Whitmore was on the phone with a reporter from the Kansas City Star who wanted to talk about First Regional Bank's pattern of rural foreclosures. and by 4 o'clock, Martin Keller's silver Lexus pulled into the lot. He had to park 100 yards away. There was no room any closer. Earl watched him walk the gauntlet of bikes and riders, his face tight, his briefcase clutched against his chest like a shield. The crowd didn't part for him, but they didn't block him either. They just watched. Keller stopped in front of the diner. Earl was waiting on the steps, Compass on one side and Dale on the other. "Mr. Haskell!" Keller's voice was strained. "Can we talk inside?" "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." Keller looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the row of leather-clad riders who stood with their arms crossed and their eyes hard. Something in his face shifted. Not defeat, not yet, but something close to it. "The bank is prepared to offer a resolution." "I'm listening." "We'll void the acceleration clause and return to the original payment terms. You'll have 18 months to catch up on the arrears, with no additional penalties or fees. In exchange, you agree not to pursue legal action or speak to the media about the loan modification." Dale stepped forward. "That's not good enough." "Excuse me?" "The modification was fraudulent. Your bank added terms to a legal document without proper disclosure. That's not just a civil matter, it's potentially criminal. And we both know Mr. Haskell isn't the only one this happened to." Dale pulled a folder from inside his jacket. The same folder he'd shown Earl 3 weeks ago, now considerably thicker. "Rosa's been busy. We've identified 11 other property owners in this county alone who had similar clauses added to their loans during refinancing. 11 families facing foreclosure because of terms they never agreed to." Keller's face went pale. "So here's what's going to happen," Dale continued. "First Regional is going to void every one of those clauses, every single one. You're going to return those families to their original payment terms, and you're going to do it publicly, with a written acknowledgement that the modifications were improper. I can't authorize that. That's a corporate decision. Then I suggest you call corporate, because in about 30 minutes, Ms. Chen over there is going to do a follow-up segment, and I'm going to hand her this folder. Every document, every name, every clause. And then we'll let the State Banking Commission sort out what's criminal and what's just deeply unethical." Keller stood frozen. The crowd had gone quiet, everyone straining to hear. Somewhere in the back, a phone camera beeped as it recorded. Then Earl spoke. "Mr. Keller." The banker looked at him. "I'm not trying to ruin you. I'm not trying to ruin anyone." Earl reached into his pocket and pulled out the bronze sobriety chip. "You see this? A man gave this to me because I fed him a bowl of chili on a cold night. It belonged to his brother, who was 11 months clean when he died. 11 months of fighting, of trying to be better, and he lost anyway. Not because he gave up, but because the world is unfair, and sometimes the poison finds you no matter how hard you try." Earl held the chip out so Keller could see it. "I know you're not a bad man. I saw the way you looked at that photograph of my wife when you came here the first time. I saw you hesitate. You're just a man doing a job you probably hate, for people who don't care about anything except numbers on a spreadsheet." Earl put the chip back in his pocket. "But you have a choice right now. You can keep being the man they want you to be, or you can be the man you actually are. I can't make that choice for you. Nobody can." The silence stretched. Earl could hear the wind moving through the bare trees, the distant rumble of an engine idling, the soft click of a camera shutter. Martin Keller closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. Not everything. He was still the same man in the same gray suit, with the same impossible pressures waiting for him back at the office. But something small had shifted. Some wall had cracked. "I'll make the call," he said quietly. "No guarantees, but I'll make the call." He walked back through the crowd, slower this time. A few riders stepped aside to let him pass. When he reached his car, he sat for a long moment before pulling out his phone. The call took 23 minutes. When it was done, Keller walked back to the diner. The crowd parted more easily this time, sensing the change. "It's done," he said. "All 11 properties. The modifications will be voided and the original terms reinstated. There will be a public statement from the bank by end of business tomorrow." Dale nodded. "And Mr. Haskell's loan?" 18 months to catch up, no penalties, no fees." Keller looked at Earl. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry, I told myself I was just doing my job, but that's not an excuse. It's never an excuse." Earl extended his hand. Keller hesitated, then took it. "Thank you," Earl said. "Don't thank me. Thank them." Keller gestured at the crowd. "I've never seen anything like this. I don't think I ever will again." He walked back to his car and drove away. This time, he didn't spray gravel. The cheer that went up could be heard half a mile down the road. That night, Earl opened the diner to everyone. He couldn't fit 200 people inside, so they spilled out into the parking lot, sitting on bikes and tailgates, passing around plates of food and bottles of beer. Someone had brought a portable speaker, and old country songs drifted through the cold air. Earl stood behind the grill for 6 hours straight, making chili from Cheryl's recipe until his arms ached and his eyes burned. Rosa found the old recipe card in the kitchen and taped it to the wall where everyone could see it, and somehow that felt right, Cheryl's handwriting watching. Over the mall. Around midnight, Compass found him sitting on the back steps, taking his first break since noon. "Hell of a day," Compass said. "Hell of a day." They sat in silence for a while. The sounds of the party drifted around the corner. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. "You know this isn't over," Compass said. 18 months is a long time. You've still got to make those payments." "I know. But you're not alone anymore. That's the difference." Compass pulled something from his vest. Not the sobriety chip this time, but a folded piece of paper. "The boys took up a collection. It's not everything, but it's a start." Earl unfolded the paper. It was a check, made out to Haskell's Diner, for $14,000. His hands started to shake. "I can't take this." "You're not taking it. You're borrowing it. When things turn around, you can pay it forward to someone else. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Compass put a hand on Earl's shoulder. "Your father knew that. Now you do too." Earl looked at the check, at the number that meant he might actually survive this. Then he looked up at the sky, at the stars scattered across the Ozark darkness like someone had spilled a jar of light. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. Thank your father. He's the one who started it." Somewhere inside the diner, someone had found the old jukebox and coaxed it back to life. The opening notes of a Merle Haggard song drifted through the door, and Earl smiled for the first time in longer than he could remember. The diner was still standing. The sign still flickered. And for the first time in years, Earl Haskell didn't feel alone. 6 months later, Earl fixed the sign. He didn't do it alone. A kid named Travis from the Iron Spur, 23 years old, apprentice electrician, face full of piercings and hands steady as a surgeon's, drove up on a Saturday morning and spent 8 hours on a ladder in the June heat. By sunset, the neon blazed complete for the first time in years. Haskell's, burning orange against the purple sky. Earl stood in the parking lot and watched it flicker to life. Beside him, Jenny held a sweating bottle of sweet tea and didn't say anything. She'd driven down from Kansas City that morning, the third visit since December, and each time it got a little easier, a little less like two strangers trying to remember how to be family. He'd finally made that call the week after the ride, told her everything, the debt, the foreclosure, the bank, the bikers. Told her he was sorry for shutting her out, for being too proud to admit he was drowning. She'd cried on the phone, and then she'd driven 4 hours through a snowstorm to sit with him in the empty diner and help him sort through 53 years of receipts and memories. They were still sorting, probably would be for a while, but that was okay. Some things couldn't be rushed. "Dad," Jenny said now, watching the sign, "Mom would have loved this." She would have complained about the electric bill. That too. They laughed, and it felt like something healing. Inside, the diner was different. Not fixed exactly. The booths were still cracked, the pie case still empty more often than not, but alive in a way it hadn't been for years. The walls were covered with photographs now, writers who'd come through over the decades, some dating back to Earl's father's time. Compass had put out the word, and they'd arrived in the mail from across the country. Polaroids and prints and phone photos, all of them showing the same thing. Men and women in leather, standing in front of a diner that had never turned them away. Cheryl's recipe card was framed behind the register next to the wedding photograph. Someone had suggested laminating it, but Earl said no. The stains and the wear were part of the story. You couldn't preserve something by pretending it hadn't been used. The first Saturday of every month was now Riders' Night. Free chili for anyone on 2 wheels, donations welcome but not required. The collection jar went to a fund Rosa had set up, half for the diner's ongoing expenses, half for a scholarship in Marcus Weather's name. Kids from the area who were trying to get clean, trying to build something better. Compass's idea. He said Marcus would have wanted his 11 months to mean something. The scholarship had already helped 3 people, a 19-year-old girl from Branson who was 6 months sober and studying to be a nurse, a veteran from Springfield who'd lost everything to pills and was slowly putting it back together, a kid from right here in town who nobody had expected to make it, and who was now working part-time at the diner while he finished his GED. Earl didn't know if it was enough, didn't know if anything could ever be enough to fill the hole that addiction carved in a family, in a community, in a life. But it was something, and something was better than nothing. Martin Keller had resigned from First Regional in February. Earl heard about it secondhand from Dale, who'd kept tabs on the situation. The bank had quietly settled with the 11 families, voiding the fraudulent clauses and paying modest restitution to avoid a lawsuit. Keller's name wasn't on any of the documents, but everyone knew he'd been the one to push it through from the inside. Last Earl heard, Keller was working for a small credit union in Tulsa. Less money, less pressure, more time with his daughter on weekends. Dale said he seemed lighter, somehow, like a man who'd finally set down something he'd been carrying too long. Earl understood that feeling. Compass still came by every few weeks, sometimes alone, sometimes with other riders. He never stayed in the room upstairs anymore. Said he'd found a way to sleep again, most nights, but he always sat at the counter and ordered a bowl of chili and talked about nothing in particular. The sobriety chip stayed with Earl now, tucked in the drawer beneath the register next to Cheryl's recipe card. Compass said that's where it belonged. Said his brother would have liked knowing it ended up in a place that helped people. On the anniversary of Marcus's death, Compass rode out alone and didn't come back for 3 days. When he finally walked into the diner, his eyes were red and his voice was rough, but he was still standing. Earl poured him coffee and didn't ask questions. Some grief you just had to carry. The best you could hope for was people willing to sit with you while you carried it. The summer stretched long and warm. Tourists rediscovered Route 76, drawn by the story that had spread across the internet and into the newspapers. The diner that 200 bikers saved. That's what the Kansas City Star had called it. Earl didn't love the headline, but he couldn't argue with the results. Business was better than it had been in a decade. Not booming, not enough to get rich, but enough. Enough to make the payments, enough to keep the lights on, enough to matter. On the last Saturday in August, Earl closed up early and walked out to the parking lot where his father's old motorcycle had sat under a tarp for 15 years. Jenny had found the key in a drawer while they were sorting through the office. A small brass thing, tarnished with age, that Earl had forgotten he still had. He'd spent the summer rebuilding the engine with help from Travis and a few other riders who knew their way around old Harleys. Now it sat gleaming in the evening light, not new, but renewed, ready for the road. Compass was waiting beside it, helmet in hand. "You sure about this?" Earl swung a leg over the seat. The leather creaked beneath him, familiar and strange at the same time. "Not even a little." "Good. That's the only way to start." Earl turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, and roared to life. A sound he hadn't heard in 15 years, a sound that belonged to his father and his youth, and a version of himself he'd almost forgotten. He looked at the diner one last time. The sign blazed against the darkening sky. Jenny waved from the window, and somewhere in the distance, the highway stretched toward the horizon like a question waiting to be answered. Earl pulled out of the lot, Compass beside him, and rode into the fading light. Stories like Earl's remind us that sometimes the help we need is closer than we think. We just have to be brave enough to accept it. If this story moved you, subscribe so you never miss one. And tell us in the comments, has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life?